You're listening to The Unstoppables, where each week we show you how to overcome obstacles and transform the sting of failure into the reward of growth. And now, here's your host, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and CEO, Bill Wooditch.
You've tuned into that place in the universe, that place where you want to learn. Maybe you're stuck. Maybe it's the resistance pulling you back. And maybe you feel that rejection is now stinging more than normal. Maybe it really hurts because you're sitting there thinking, geez, I was on a roll. I had momentum. How do I get that going again? This is where you learn. This is where you learn to be unstoppable from those people who are doing those things you dream about, who have done those things that you want to do, and can help you shorten that distance and lessen that metaphorical blood flow from where you are and where you're determined to go. You're now in that zone. Today's special guest is a best-selling author, professor, coach, professional public speaker, and a mountaineer. Not from West Virginia, a real mountaineer. West Virginia people probably turn me off on that one, but his name is Chuck Garcia. He has inspired people across the globe to successfully reach greater heights, personally and professionally. You know, every successful climb to the top of a mountain requires a strong and supportive team. Well, with over 25 years on Wall Street, 6 years teaching at institutions like Columbia University, and nearly 4,500 copies sold of his book, he's our very special guest today. You know, I gotta tell you, your bio is impressive at the very least. I mean, that is an impressive bio, my friend. I feel like to do what you've done, you're going to be a great voice on the Unstoppables, and you have the energy and commitment to keep on going. Welcome to the show.
I appreciate it, Bill. Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute to your show.
You know, I'm a neophyte when it comes to mountain climbing because I look at a mountain and say, nah, that's, it's a little too high for me. But let's start at what they call it base camp and go with your background and maybe give a little information from 30,000 feet and come down. Give us a little bit about Chuck Garcia.
I'd be happy to. Well, thank you, Bill. Well, I grew up, interestingly enough, in a product. I grew up in a military base in West Point, New York, where my dad was a professor of linguistics. So even though he was a civilian professor, I grew up in two cultures. I grew up in a civilian academic culture, and when I walked out of my house, I was surrounded by military. So my base camp was always trying to find the integration between thinking creatively is what I was taught in my home, and yet bringing the discipline and the perseverance that I learned from the military. So as I emerged, I'd never wanted to go into the military, but I wanted to use what I learned from it. And I went to college at Syracuse. I'm an Orange man, and I went to Wall Street. All I ever wanted to do was to make my parents proud, to get off their payroll, and then to travel the world, becoming a subject matter expert to the extent that I knew what that was in finance, and it all came true. So I think foundationally, Bill, where I come from is a place of loving parents who helped encourage me to be unstoppable, because my dad never quite understood what it is I wanted to do. He didn't get that world. But what I knew is I grew up with a tremendous world of support and mentorship, and I dedicate myself every day to go to work in the service of someone else's success, just like my parents did for me.
You know, I think it's an interesting talking point, the marriage of creativity with discipline. So many of us have these wishful fantasies that we think are dreams and goals, but they're simply a fantasy because we don't have the discipline to take that creativity, distill it, and then make it into something that's a process or a product. And tell me a little bit about maybe a tip or two about how you harness that creativity and then marry it to discipline so you're following through on those tasks to make them reality.
Well, if it begins with the creativity, what we recognize is the endless world of possibilities, that you're not in a particular lane ever, in spite of what the world tells you. Oh, stay in your lane. I never accepted that advice. I appreciate there are times when you need to be in it, but I think from the mindset that we work to develop, that's bad advice. I think the mindset is look at the world of endless possibilities until you figure out what that lane is that's working for you. Because what I found is people seem to have an opinion about you and your lane, when in fact, I think each of us has to decide what that is, and it doesn't come in aha moments. It's not one big thing. It's a series of steps which leads us to the other side of what you're suggesting. You take the creativity, and what does discipline do? Discipline teaches you to hear no and to carry on in spite of any negativity you get from the rest of the world. So my mindset, Bill, what I brought to my career and what ultimately became a mountaineer, it's really three things. The discipline is you set a goal and you recognize it may change, but you set it. You know what you're shooting for. The second thing, you take one step at a time. That's all we're capable of doing. I don't know how to take any more than that other than once. But here's the most important part, and this is what I would impart to everybody. The third lesson of mountaineering and the life we lead is you can't do it alone. And I think when I think about my education, even though we played sports and people danced, I drill home to people. The other two are okay, but nothing is more important than the community you surround yourself with, which is going to help you to attain the goals and to inspire you to set one goal to take one step at a time.
Three great points: goal and you know the ability to stay on point, and you can't get through this alone. You need a team. And you also channeled in on point number two, the Ethiopian proverb, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so many of us look at the opus of work and we think, oh, we can't ever do all of that. We can't if we start with that one bite. I got to ask you a question about bells ringing and activity and energy. What was it? Give me a little flavor of Wall Street for you. What was that? What was that like being on Wall Street?
Well, I didn't know. I was 8 years old and I saw a picture of the New York Stock Exchange. And I didn't have a clue what that meant. You know, an academic dad, military, and I'm looking at this picture. And then I see it on TV and I see all these guys running around. And it's not like it's a football field. It's like this office. And there's people with machines. And they're all, I didn't know what they were doing. But what I drew from it was an enormity of energy. And when I think about it and I looked at what people did for a living, nobody seems to be doing that. Why would I go to an office and sit in a place? I don't know what they're doing, but whatever it is, I was drawn to it. So as I started to investigate, what is it like? As I came to understand what it was when I left college and I immediately started my career, there is a dynamic nature of the world of finance that at every given second, something is going to change. So what it was like was an incredibly energetic, incredibly ambitious, and a fast-paced, very smart people who were all working in the service of the next goal. And it wasn't just the money. That's a part of it where people came to it. But Wall Street was about the world of raising capital so that if you take this money, you can actually do something good with it. So unlike the Wolf of Wall Street culture, which it paints a certain picture, where I was drawn to was very smart people who were able to understand how to amass, preserve, and grow capital, and then create, and this is where the creativity came in, create a world of organizations that could do something that either the world needed or the world could ultimately recognize as valuable. That's what it meant to me. So when I joined it and I started traveling the world, I said, oh my God, this is what I thought it was. I'm surrounded by very smart, ambitious people who are constantly on the move in the service of creation. That was my point of view. And my goodness, was I'm so glad I was drawn to it and that I stepped into it willingly. Wouldn't have had it any other way.
So give me three takeaways on Wall Street. If you're going to export three takeaways for survival, we'll start with survival before we look to thrive. The three ways to survive on Wall Street, which is
The first way to survive is understanding you may get 100 no's in your day, but if you get one yes, you keep carrying on. That's the first one. It's getting used to no. Not unlike actors or everyone else, it's the same thing. It's not different.
Yeah.
Second thing, the recognition that every day is potentially different. There's no such thing as being static, because if you're static and you're not thinking ahead and you're not thinking smart, you're out of business. And then the third, and it goes a little bit to the first point, but I think this is, Bill, for all of us in our careers, you learn this before you read about Darwin. And while it sounds a little bit trite, it is very much a jungle. And if you're not adaptable on the jungle, you're dead. And you learn on Wall Street to take those knocks and to recognize that, okay, you breathe through it, you turn to your friends, you're in a jam, you recognize that it's the Winston Churchill thing that you go from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
It's like that success is not final and failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And that's Wall Street to me, because you're in this race. People are going 100 miles an hour. And if you don't learn how to both keep pace and figure out how to go a little bit faster every day, then you got to find something else to do. So I think for me, it really helped teach me.
See, I'm loving what you're saying, because I'm identifying with that. I love the dynamic nature of what I do. And I think every day can be and is different for me in a lot of ways. I embrace change. As a matter of fact, it's probably part of my rebel nature that if you tell me to go left, I'm going to go right. I don't like lanes. When you said lanes, I almost shuddered. It's like someone telling me you should do that. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm embracing that, but that's the kind of elixir you need to make it in business. You mentioned dynamic, you mentioned change, you mentioned pace, and you got to be picking it up every day. And I coach people who still do the old fashioned thing of making calls 100, 110, 120. You have to, if you burned your boat, you got to pay the price. There's a cost of success. That's part of the underbelly. So I really love what you're importing there and exporting to the audience. I think it's huge. Tell me about what you taught at Columbia.
Yeah, well, I teach there. I'm delighted I'm on faculty. I teach soft skills in the Graduate School of Engineering to very brilliant, hard-skilled engineers. And the reason I teach there is Columbia was told by all of these employers that come to campus, and they hire all of these brilliant engineers. And they're adult learners, so most of them are in their upper 20s. They've been through an undergraduate engineers. They're now learning even more the science of engineering. And the employer said to Columbia, "You're sending us great engineers." And you hear the dramatic pause. But, okay, what's the but? Many of them as engineers are now ascending to certain positions, and they're being promoted on the strength of their technical competence. But what happens either from their ambitions or the company's desire to give you something else to do? The job description changes. And what happens with engineers, as many people in their career, as you ascend into more leadership positions, you're doing less engineering, and you're expected to motivate, to recruit, to present, to do all of these things that aren't in the realm of engineering, but someone has to lead the engineers. So Columbia, I worked with them to construct and to architect a program called Professional Development and Leadership. And they hired a few guys like me, guys who are good at our field. I teach two things. I teach them public speaking skills, how to get on stage to stand and deliver. And I teach something called emotional intelligence, how to stay calm and keep your composure so that you are not crushed under the weight of enormous expectations. So what a privilege it is to bring both of them. Your need to inspire, persuade, and provoke change, even though that's not what you were trained to do, somewhere in your career, the expectation changes if you expect to continue to emerge in your company. And then very smart people who often get caught up under the weight of expectations and lose their cool, lose their temper, not in control of their emotions. These are career killers, especially in this day and age where the cameras are on. So, Bill, it's a wonderful privilege to be able to bring these skills that are anathema to the engineers. Yet now, many of them that are out in the field come back and say, thank you so much. And nobody told us when we were learning formulas and quadratic equations and memorization. That's all good, but they didn't prepare us for those unexpected soft skills, which became the basis of their career growth.
I think that's vital, what you're doing. It's vital.
Thank you.
Those are life skills. And those are the emotional skills that I'm looking for, people who have a higher degree of the emotional quotient, the emotional intelligence than I am book smarts, because if you have a certain level of book smarts and you're not able to apply them in a pragmatic way, I like the combo of book and street, but if you can't do it, you're just sitting there thinking about philosophy, and you're not actually doing things that turn a result. And speaking of result, good.
Yeah, one of the ways that I open up class, because you need buy-in from the engineers. These are very intelligent people. They're certainly accomplished academically. And the first thing that I lead with any class, for those that don't know me, I toss up LinkedIn's 2020 top 5 hard skills and soft skills. I lead with the hard skills, and they're not unexpected. Blockchain technology, cloud computing, artificial intelligence. So what I'm doing, I'm trying to get them to yes. We're good with that? Okay. And this is what the world demands of you as engineers, right? Cool. Then let me throw up the LinkedIn soft skills. Number 1, and this is a shocker to them, creativity. So I said, all right, guys, this is 1. We got 4 more to go. What's 2? Persuasion. Right out of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Number 3, here's a clincher. Collaboration. You mean they actually care about that? Indeed, they do. You can bring your brilliance, but if you can't work well with people, you are inhibiting your career path. Number 4, Bill, and this is my favorite, adaptability. And number 5, my second favorite, emotional intelligence. So if you think about the weight of what the market is telling our engineers, here it is, guys. Here are the soft skills. What I tell them, this is what I'm here to teach you. You don't have to believe me. Believe the marketplace. The evidence is right in front of you. It's like Star-Spangled Banner and like rockets firing. My goodness, nobody told us that. Whatever, I'm here to help you understand if this is what the marketplace is not only asking you,
Right.
This is what the market is saying it rewards. Well, then I think it's our responsibility to help you to climb to those rewards. And that's why I teach it. Fairly straightforward justification to that skill set.
You know what? And that's an excellent tool to use. And it's credibility of assumed credibility of LinkedIn, that credibility of what the marketplace is making the story and narrative for you. So that's a great approach as well.
Indeed.
Let's talk about success, and I can see why people bought so many copies of your book, because of the substance you're bringing to the table.
Thank you.
In your book, A Climb to the Top, Communication and Leadership Tactics to Take Your Career to New Heights, you talk about the primacy effect and the regency effect.
Indeed.
What are these two concepts of communication, and why are they critical?
Yeah, let me start with why they're critical. When you think about a conversation, Bill, where somebody turns on your television, radio show, read a book, whatever it is, as human beings, we tend to remember the first thing that we hear. Think about even a song on the radio. You hear the opening line, and we tend to remember the last thing that we hear, the recency effect. So the primacy effect, first 10 seconds, hear a tune. Oh, you notice how you hum the first measure to whatever song comes on. And then as the song tails out, we tend to remember that. We don't remember very much what's in between. So what we know is when we are communicating, each of us is competing for 2 things. We're competing for time and we're competing for attention. Mm-hmm. And as you begin the conversation, what happens is the attention span immediately begins to dip. Not for any other reason other than we got a million things on our mind. We'll hear you at first, but we never forget in the middle, even though we may not remember what you said, we will never forget how you made us feel. So what we try to do is recognize when someone is stepping on stage, and I came to figure this out through years of public speaking and getting it wrong before I got it right. People are keyed into your opening, and they're going to remember and talk about you in the room for lunch in the recency effect, what they remembered you said last. So in my book, it's a proprietary framework that I use, that I developed myself over years of being a public spokesman for a company called Bloomberg. So I was very fortunate early in my career. I joined this little company that no one ever heard of with a guy that no one ever heard of named Mike Bloomberg, who went on to become the 3-term mayor of New York and ran for president. I was on stage for that company for years, and no one taught me how to do it. I had to figure it out myself. So the primacy recency effect in each of the different commandments that I note in a climb to the top, I use the metaphor of career climbing and mountain climbing. There are tools and techniques that you need to ascend that mountain, and I use it in the context of public speaking. If you want to ascend in your career and climb to the top jobs typically go to the best communicators. How can I help you to become that? Read A Climb to the Top.
That's excellent. Between academic credentials, professional experiences, natural ability, and communication skills, what do you think is most important for career success?
Oh, I think without question, I am so glad to teach it, and maybe I'm a little bit biased, but what I know is no matter what you do for a living, teacher, engineer, it makes no difference. The common thread among human beings is the need to connect and to collaborate. How do you do that? It doesn't matter whatever your hard skill is. If you're a brilliant engineer and you can't collaborate, you can't look them in the eye, and you can't earn somebody's trust and credibility. And I think it comes down to 3 things. And I'm going to say these letters: CRT, credibility, respect. You use them both to earn trust. Forget even, I'm going to set aside communication skills and emotional intelligence. I think those are tactics and those are important, but those are the things that we do to earn the credibility, respect, and trust. And if you use them to build that among your community, we recognize that each of us, any human being, we generally look for 3 things in our lives. And I'll use A, B, C. A, agency. We want to have the autonomy to make up our own mind to do what we want to do. B, have a sense of belonging. We want to feel that we're part of a community. And C is a cause. We grow, or we go to work every day with a cause, because this is our passion. And this ABC, Bill, is out of a book called Life is in the Transitions. And it's a wonderful book where it explains those. And I think each of us, in order to maximize ABC, we build our credibility, trust, and respect by our communication skills, by our emotional intelligence, and by the recognition that we are part of something much bigger than us, so that we are here to help others so they may help us.
It's an abundance mentality as opposed to a scarcity mentality. And that is the way that I've always moved forward. What can I do? How can I share? I'll tell you, this is a secret that I was applying to an Ivy League school to go to law school, and the question was by John Donne, and the statement is, no man is an island. What do you mean by that? At the time, I was a cocky, egotistical maniac and thought, I don't know. Now I do. I didn't get into law school. I figured it out.
Well, no man is an island. As a mountaineer, I've climbed a lot of mountains, and I came to mountaineering later in my life. I was 42 when I climbed Mount Rainier, and I started climbing other mountains. But I came to realize the most important part of mountaineering, and it wasn't the skills, it wasn't the shape I was in, it was something called the law of reciprocity. And I remember when we got to the top of Kilimanjaro, we were huffing and puffing. It took about 5.5 days to get to the top. It took 2 days to get down, and you're in your head because you're walking and you're feeling good and you're getting your air back. And it hit me, oh my God, what a joy. How privileged was I? I didn't get up that mountain. All these guides, they in the service of us and our team, They took us there. They gave up their time. They shared their expertise to in the service of our goal. I didn't do this alone. It's not just because I had the strength or the technical skills to get up any mountain. They gave to us so that when we got off the mountain, I got home, I wanted to be able to give to others what they did to us so selflessly. And that law of reciprocity is very much the John Donne, no man is an island. I could not have scaled those mountains on my own. I wouldn't even
Right.
want to. You are spot on with that.
But you know, you're a next level guy. You're always leveling it up. So there's something inside of you, and I want you to get inside there and share this with us, because you're doing the next challenge, the next thing. And I wrote down the ABCs on agency and belonging and cause, and you seem to always pick that cause. You have the agency, you get the team, that's the belonging. But that cause is a fire that's burning because you're always setting that bar.
Indeed.
So tell me what's in that achiever's DNA of yours that keeps setting that bar up there to do something different. Because mountain climbing is a freaking, at 42 years old, is a huge undertaking.
It
Set
is.
up for failure.
I tell you, the fire comes from my childhood obesity. I was an obese kid. And at the age of 13, I stepped on the scale when my dad encouraged me to face my challenge. And I weighed 207 pounds and I was 5 feet 4 inches tall. And I said, oh my God. And with my dad and the love of my dad and my parents and them helping me get through it, I dropped 52 pounds over the course of time. And Bill, that was the worst thing at the time. And it became the best thing at the time, because the consequence and the reward that came with the recognition that at 13, I could transform into not being bullied anymore, into really taking control of my own life. Even though that was 47 years ago, you never forget how you felt. You never forget how bullied you were, and you never forget the kindness of the people that were your friends before when you were 207 and your friends who were there when you were 155 as I was. You never lose that, nor would I ever want to. But what I learned from that experience is when I transformed into this guy half my size, it was something in my mindset that from here on in, I'm never going back to that place because I've been there. I'm not going there. But what I did decide to do is, now that I'm in another place, I'm going to bring my A game. I'm going to bring it to my friends. I'm going to bring it to myself. I am just going to bring the best version of myself, because when I heightened the contrast of what was the worst version of myself, I know what that feels like. And here I am. There has to be a reason why I went through that. And Bill, I think now in my adult life, and it's still in my head, I am so blessed for that adversity, for getting beat up, for getting bullied, all good, because it led me to another place that I think in a way was that blessing in disguise, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And
A very similar story about, and I coach people on finding the fracture. I call it the fracture. In case it isn't really a fracture, but find that those seeds of discontent, and find that feeling, because I want to keep that fire, the flame of me in a foreclosed future, working in a factory from 9 to 5 and no way out. And I want to feel that. I want to feel the nipping of fear at my heels. I want to feel the insecurity, the need to validate, myself. And so I keep that near and dear. It doesn't, by any means, I'm the sovereign of my life in that way, but I do have to summon it once in a while when I need to do something big. So, we're very similar in that way. I want to ask you about TED speakers. Yeah, I'm going to buy your book. And
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm remiss in not buying it earlier, but you are not beyond intriguing. You have gotten to the point of interesting, informational. There's a whole dynamic about you that is, I got to see it in the pages too. Yeah. Tell me about TED Talks. Who are some of the best, and why are they good at what they do?
I look at, I think my favorite TED Talks probably come down to 3. Certainly, we're going to give Brené Brown all the credit. She deserves it all, not only in her style, but in her just bringing the power of vulnerability to light in a world where people expect us to be perfect robots. We're not. We're human beings that make mistakes. And what she says often is, on any given day, you can choose courage or you can choose comfort, but you can't choose both. The power of her TED Talk was simply distilled into such an intimate and powerful moment. What are you going to choose? That's my favorite one. Second one is a guy named Ken Robinson who completely set out to want to change, and he really talked about the educational model being in the lane, being uncreative and being dull, and we are not maximizing the creativity of our children because the educational model expects us to memorize a formula and to get an A and to feel good about it. His point is we are being stifled, indeed. And I think the third, which I loved, is probably Amy Cuddy's Body Language, where I looked at that because what she brought to the world was a method of communication without saying a word. And when I teach body language, I think back to that and how important it is that in a world where we don't believe half the crap we hear, we tend to believe 100% of what we see. And I think this is the most underestimated aspect of communication. And thank God to her for bringing this to life and helping us recognize that the body speaks before the mouth opens. And when I teach the executives that I coach, the students that I teach, help them to recognize, remember, the moment you get up and all eyes are on you, you are communicating. Be mindful, and in the primacy effect, the first thing that people are going to remember, did you make eye contact? What are you doing with your hands? So those kinds of things, Bill, those are my favorite, but there are so many good ones, and I'm grateful for teaching people to get onto the TED stage. What a wonderful forum, because it helps us to recognize in the modern world what are the important ways in which we communicate.
You know, I'm thinking about what you're saying, and you put your hands up, and that's another one of those TED Talks where, you know, people see that you're not a threat. You know,
not backhanded. The handshake goes back to the days of hiding a weapon.
Right.
This is a backhanded comment, so what we don't want to do, and always transparent, never behind you. What are you hiding? So the transparency of the eyes, the smile, and the hands, these are the three corners of how we communicate non-verbally. And so many people, when they get up to present, they're not conscious of these three things. Yet, how important are the hands? Oh my God, that's what makes us human. The ability to touch, to handshake, to embrace. We don't even have to see somebody. We can close our eyes and we could put our hands right next to each other, and we begin to feel the warmth of the other individual.
Yes.
This is the beauty of it. And yet we're missing it in the COVID world. But one day when we get back, I'm vigilant about this is how we connect to each other when you don't need to say something all the time. Just let your hands do the talking. And look at couples that are intimate. What do? They hold hands. Are they communicating? And often in class, I'll throw up and I'll get yeses and nos. Are they communicating? I will put sometimes a picture of somebody slipping a ring right on someone's finger. Is that individual communicating? Yes or no? Yes. How do you know? Simple, just by the way the hands are speaking. We know. Or when they're holding hands, are they communicating? Of course they are. Then why are we talking so much? Sometimes I just want to say, everybody just shut the hell up.
This is more. You're
just let your hands say hello. And
as you're talking, I'm thinking about some of the top speakers, and I mean some of the most famous ones you've ever heard of, and a lot of times they have their hands in their pocket or pockets, and I don't get it. How do you, in your terms, how do you define success?
Success comes down to, are you doing what you want to do, when you want to do it, and where you want to do it? It's that simple. And I think I take a lot of success, Bill, from Steve Jobs' commencement address to Stanford. When he was talking, I think the biggest takeaway, and it really related to success, he said, look into the mirror, and when you ask yourself, if today were my last day on earth, is this exactly what I should be doing? And if the answer is no too many days in a row, then it's time for a change. Success to me is one who comes to terms with those questions and makes the conscious decision, go do that thing that you're telling yourself in the mirror, but you're too afraid to execute on it for fear of judgment, fear of the risk that you're going to take. I think success is being able to answer that question and to make the conscious strategic decision that I'm going to do what I want to do, not what the rest of the world expects of me.
I've been doing this show for a while. I did a serious radio show for a while. I ask that question every time. It's probably the most profound, resonant answer that I've ever heard. I'm going to take that and use it for my own now.
Hey, it's not mine. Let's give credit to Steve Jobs but I think all of us, and I think what I do, Bill, and you and I are kindred spirits in this. We face so many people, and there's no judgment. There's no right or wrong. Many people who are locked into the fear of three things: the fear of making mistakes, the fear of judgment, and the fear of failure. And I understand the stigmas that come with many of them, but I'm not one of them that succumbs to that. And maybe it's because when the 13-year-old in me lost 50 pounds, I recognize I got nothing left to lose. I have...
Like officer to gentleman, you got nowhere else to go.
That's a good point. Where do you go? But I think I don't fear failure anymore. I don't fear making mistakes. I don't care if I make a mistake, just fix it. Yet, so many people that I work with are just held captive by those fears. I think what we can do, what you and I do for a living, we help people get comfortable in the discomfort and to recognize who gives a damn what the rest of the world has to say. If you tried something and you screwed it up, what are you going to do? That sun's going to come up tomorrow. Just don't listen to the rest of the world.
We could riff on this for a long time over libation, but it's going to go way back to the time of being ostracized and killed by a saber-toothed tiger. Don't stick out. Don't do this. Don't be judged.
Right.
So there's a whole lot of group dynamics going on with that one, and that's an interesting one. I believe that awareness carries with it an obligation to act upon that which you're now aware. You are shedding rays of awareness. And I mean that. That is not one of these things we pull out and it's glib and it sounds good. You are throwing down some content. Where do we find you to get more?
You can always find me on my website, which is chuckgarcia.com. And on there is a tab where you can contact me. My email address, and I'm delighted to hear from our listeners, is chuck@Climb, C-L-I-M-B, leadership.com. That's the name of my company, Climb Leadership, named it after the mountaineer that I've become. It just seemed a no-brainer. So I always love to hear from others. And Bill, I am grateful to you for the opportunity to come onto your show, but also thank you for doing what you do, because I know the people that you inspire, and I see the books that are behind you, Always Forward, Fail More. Those are the messages that you and I and many others bring to the world. And I'm grateful to be able to collaborate with you, that we are so common in what we bring and that we can help people recognize it's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
We'll get through this.
Yes. I'm not letting you out yet, though.
No worries.
You're in the bonus round. So the opposite side of success, the other part of the coin, is failure. What do you consider your biggest failure, and what did you take away from that?
Well, one of the things I throw up in my class, that in this class, there is no failure. There's only feedback. So I've made a lot of mistakes. I've made some career mistakes. I've made some blunders. But Bill, I will never say that I failed at anything. What I will say is that I learned a lot from the things that I may have regretted. But in the end, when I look back at what it is, or decisions that I made that were not the smartest ones, I learned from every one of them. Yeah. And that's just not a trite expression. I recognize that as a human being, I sometimes may not make the best decisions, but also I'm never afraid to make a mistake if I do have one fear. It's that I fear not learning from that mistake. So when I failed or I've done something that was wrong, while I may regret it and apologize to others if I hurt anybody unintentionally along the way, I don't see failure as failure. I see it as an opportunity to knock myself silly to figure out how could I have done that better and then do it better.
A couple of things there. If we don't learn from the lessons of history, we are condemned to repeat them. That's Santayana. And if we don't learn from the lessons of failure, it's just an experience. And I'm the same way, trying to pull it. But I'll tell you, my biggest fear is regret. So you talked about courage and comfort with Brene Brown.
Yeah.
I always play it forward. And I think, if I don't do these things today, will I have at a certain point in the stage of my life where I can't do the things now? Will I have regret? That is the thing that keeps me going. That is the driver behind me. I don't want to regret it or not.
Yeah.
So.
And I look at it too. I certainly don't want to regret it. I look at one other thing, and this is on my mind sometimes. And sometimes I see, or if I have a fear, not necessarily regret, it's a fear of stagnation. I see so many people, and it's a bit of the paradox of success. I see particularly many that I coach, they get to be at a certain place and they're successful and they're good at it. And then they stay with it. It's like, okay, and I understand that. But I'm not here to help you stay there. I'm here to help you to break the stagnation that you got really good at something. How about today, we're going to do 3 things you've never done before, and you're going to suck at every one of them. How you feel about that? Oh, that's terrible. No, that's not terrible. In fact, I think what I try to lead by example, in the last 20 years, I set out to do things I'd never done before. I'd never taught a college class. I'd never written a book. I never climbed a mountain. I never was a radio host. I do all these things. And I'm not saying it to pat myself on the back. I was conscious and strategic that in the next evolution of my career, I'm going to do things I've never done. And I'm perfectly willing to be terrible at them because that's how I'm going to get better. So when I wrote my book, I hated my first 3 chapters. My editor was awesome. By chapter 4, we got really good. I simply rewrote 1, 2, and 3. So you never saw how 1, 2, and 3 sucked.
That's where the sausage was made. Yeah.
Right. And my first 2 radio shows as a host on ABC Radio in New York, I didn't like my first 2 shows, and I called my first 2 guests and I apologized. And I said, I'm really sorry. I did just a lousy job. And they said, no, you didn't. No, I did. I didn't give you enough time. I didn't give you enough space. I looked back and I'm really sorry. And I can't bring that radio show back, but what I can do for the next guest, I got to learn from this. And we evolve. And I think I just want to shake any stagnation that comes with aging and maturation. I don't think because we age and we become successful that we should just keep doing what we've always done. I think we should continue to strive to do the things we haven't done in spite of the fact that we're not very good at it.
I'm going to circle back with a comment on that, but first I'm going to tell you the name of your next book. I just picked it out for you. Consciously Strategic. It's going to be a bestseller.
Let me write that down. Thank you for planting the seed.
Let me tell you, and I've worked with a number of people that I hired at a certain level of income and then broke through the gates and started making the 7 figures and came back to me and said, where's my happiness? And that's a whole nother conversation at some point, which I said is always mutually exclusive. But then we do the same thing. And then they started pulling back from the field of fire and withdrawing and trying to stay in that mode of comfort, that circle of comfort in their own castles that they have built, not understanding that the warriors outside that castle were coming for them the same way they came out of the castle. They needed to come out of the castle and do more of the same things that they did, but they didn't want to do it because their ego is now attached to their position, to their paycheck, to their self-validation, and they didn't want to get stung by the rejection of maybe I'm not good enough on these next 100 calls. So they withdrew, and invariably it happens, and they will stop and they will stagnate. At that point, when they kickstart, sometimes the momentum is so against them that it takes so much longer and harder to get going. So that's just a comment. I've seen that in people. It's the ego that gets in the way. Most of the time it is.
It's a commonality we all see. And I think for those that recognize it, I'd like to think we have an obligation to help them to try to get unstuck. And I think that's what we do for a living, help them to get unstuck and to see the benefit of trying to break through the stagnation in spite of the risks, trade-offs that we are willing to accept.
And I think there's different forms of credibility that I teach the same way that you speak about. And I always tell people trust is something that must be granted over consistent performance and behavior. Only the fool, grants it up front. It's got to be earned. Trust is earned, consistent performance. And I think that in speaking with you, there are so many, and I mean brilliant, and I'm very loath to use that word unless it's about me, but there's so many brilliant.
Thank you for putting me into the same club.
Man, you're way above. I'm just trying to reach it. I'm aspiring now. But there are so many brilliant takeaways from this. I hope people take this, play it, find your book, look through it. And you're a next person. So I'm going to give you my 2 last takeaway questions. The next one is, what is next for you besides writing that book called Consciously Strategic? What is next for you?
Yeah. Part of my brand of when I wrote the book, what I didn't recognize, what do I have here? How can I bring myself to so many other people that I help? And what's next for me is achievement of scale. So part of that achievement of scale is coming in a couple ways. 1, I started my radio show. 2, I filmed a pilot episode that we'd like to sell to Hollywood. It's also called A Climb to the Top. And then the next part, which you're going to see, everyone will see in about a month or so, we have formed an online learning platform. And I have to say, I was skeptical at first, but I've had a tremendous encouragement from my Columbia students and my clients, bring the teaching online. So we have created something called the Emotional Intelligent Learning Institute, EL. It's about all of my teachings, teaching for TED Talk, teaching emotional intelligence, teaching communication, that I can bring to the world online. And I state that because so many of my Columbia students are from China and India. And in the COVID world, they never made it to the Columbia campus. And they're regretting and it's not their fault, they couldn't get here. So we're going to have to bring ourselves to them. And one of the ways to do it, what's next, is the learning platform on emotional intelligence and communication. So Bill, in a way, being the businessman, like anyone else, you scale or fail. I can't say there's a failure here, but I would like to scale that because I am so blessed for the many people that I've been able to help. I can help more. And the only way to do it, I can't be in more than one place at one time physically, but through the technology, it enables us to bring our work to others, to scale it so that people can be on the other end of our learning outcomes without having to come to New York to do it.
When it's available, I will subscribe to it because there's a lot I could learn from you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're laying down some great stuff. And I think that's going to be a huge, wildly popular course with a lot of impact.
Thank you very much. I am grateful for that.
And I can't sing, but if I was going to do Sinatra, I'd say, and now the end is near.
Actually, that's not bad.
If you can write a paragraph for others to follow, you're gone from this earth. You climb mountains, you're 160 years old, you finally at your final resting base camp. You're going to leave something, a script for others to follow to say, this is what they can learn from you in one paragraph. What would that read like?
That the best way to grow yourself is to go to work in the service of someone else's success.
Man, I didn't even give you that. You just hit it out of the park. Excellent.
It's what we do, Bill. We have different ways of expressing it, but it's what we do every day. And I think the reason I say that is too many people feel that success is something that they need to achieve on their own. It's not. Think about the scale. If you can help 100 people to succeed, think about the 100x and the power that comes back to you. You've multiplied yourself by 100. You may not realize that at the moment. That's what it is.
Force multiplier.
Yep.
He is enlightening. He is engaging. He is a teacher. He is highly empathic. His name is Chuck Garcia. He was my special guest today on The Unstoppables. Check out his book, buy his courses. I'm going to be first in line. Just let me know when. Thank you, sir.
Bill, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to The Unstoppables. If you like today's episode, please consider subscribing. We have a new episode every Thursday. Please help spread the word of the show by leaving us a positive review on iTunes or Stitcher. Those 5-star reviews really help out the show. You can subscribe to The Unstoppables on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Thanks again for listening. Always forward.